Thank you for joining me today for episode 8 of Soapbox Daily. Today, we're discussing why do people have kids if they're not going to raise them right? Interesting topic, especially today's world population. But as always, how is your integrity today? So this topic is an interesting one, and I wonder whether or not people actually stop and think about things before they decide to actually do the act, right? Can I have kids, etc., etc.? Can I afford to have kids? And I don't really think people in that heat of the moment will actually stop and go, oh, is this something that I should be doing? Should I be not taking precautions? What happens if, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's get to a little structured before we get into that. Let's start off with the basic. When we ask the question, why do people have kids if they're not going to raise them right? This covers a bunch of different areas, not just disciplinary and life lessons and everything else. So let's start off with, do people think about whether they can afford kids? Because that is important. Can you afford a kid? Should you bring a child into this world and they're impoverished and they are poor and they are hungry and they are suffering and they are doing without? So, are you going to raise them right? Well, raising them right is also your responsibility full time, raising them right and raising them and having them in an environment where they are not suffering. Do you think it's really fair to bringing another life into this world, if you yourself are suffering, that they should have to suffer as well? First question should always be that. Can you afford to have a kid? Can you afford to have a child and bring it into the world to be able to provide for it without relying on everybody else and without relying on the government or handouts or whatever? That should be always the first question people should ask before they have kids. Is it fair to bring this child into this world? Really? That should be the first thing you should ask, especially if it's a planned thing or a potentially a possibility because you're doing the funky chicken with somebody and, oh, oops, there you go, it happens. So that's one thing you should really think about. And also think about where they'll grow up. Where do you live? Is it safe? Is it a good example for them? Is it a good environment? Is it a nurturing environment? Are they going to be subjected to a bad element, which is going to make them not grow up the best way with the best morals and the best viewpoints and the best examples? Yeah. And then it comes down to, do some people feel it is their right to have a children, even if someone else has to pay for their care? No, I'm sorry. If you take on the responsibility of bringing a life into this world, that should be on you. That should not be anybody else's responsibility. That should be on you. You should be in a position where you can afford to have the child. You can afford to provide for the child. You can afford to clothe it, to raise it, to feed it, everything else. There's no ifs, ands, or buts or excuses. That's your responsibility. It should not be put on anybody else. Just because you feel it's your God-given right to bear life or have a child, that does not mean you should have one. Parenting, just because you can actually produce a child, does not mean you should have a child or doesn't mean you're a parent either. A parent takes a huge responsibility. So this, I guess, covers, of course, what people should think about before having children. For starters, can I afford it? Do I want the child? Will it be raised in the right environment? Will it have the best examples? Will it have a good life? All these questions you really have to think about. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I support abortion. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying, do you really want to bring a child with the bad examples in the world and just cause more problems for the world and yourself and everything else? I'm not saying go out and abort. I'm just thinking, do some smart planning before you start doing the nasty, and potentially having a child. Protect yourself to prevent that from happening. If you're not ready for that responsibility, it should be on you, not anybody else. Okay? It's not just you that you have to think about, and that's where the selfish part comes in. You should think about that child and the life that they're going to have. You bring them in, impoverished world. You can't feed them, you can't clothe them. They grow up in a bad area. They have crime and everything else, and then they learn to do that, and then they just create more problems for the world. They create more problems for you, for the world, for them. They're not happy. I guess my point being here is that no, chances are you should not. And you should really think about that one, because my heart breaks every single time I see single parents with several kids and the kids are doing without. They require handouts from everybody else. What kind of life is that to grow up in? It really isn't. And I know parents that truly love their kids and want best for their kids are going to do whatever they can. Really think about it before you run out and do that. Okay, this is probably a topic for a longer show. I'm a little sensitive on that one because I see a lot of that, and it's just not right just to have a kid because you think it's your right. No, your kid has rights too. So keep that, in mind. Okay, so moving right along. we're going to wrap it up for today. Please check out getoffmysoapbox.com. We have our long format show of Get Off My Soapbox podcast airing next week, August 3rd. Be there, check that out. Other than that, I hope you have a great day moving forward. I'm your host, Mad Morgan, and I will see you tomorrow.